Thanks so much for having me here today. It's an honor to share with you this vision that is, I think, really impacting the Web3 ecosystem for how we can address some of the most fundamental limitations of the current DeFi infrastructure. DeFi has really transformed the world of finance, the world of Web3, by offering sort of pretty unparalleled opportunities for financial innovation, speculation, trading, et cetera. And yet at the same time, it's been unable to perform some of the most fundamental features of a financial system independently. While DeFi has led to huge amounts of derivatives and trading of different cryptocurrencies and tokens, it hasn't been able to do uncollateralized lending. The basic functions that credit cards and before them store credit systems have done for hundreds of years. The reason is that in the Web3 ecosystem, everything is tradable, everything is transferable. And so anything that can be pledged in order to uphold a loan is collateral. It's some transferable asset, not someone's reputation, their background, their promises. Similarly, we've seen this explosion of opportunity in the NFT space. The value of the NFT market has grown to be similar to all of the rest of the art market put together. And yet at the same time, while Web3 offers a platform for trading NFTs, it doesn't actually allow us to create their value in the first place, because the value of NFTs comes from their scarcity. And their scarcity comes from a commitment by the artist not to make replicas of the same thing, something that cannot be done in a wallet that has no commitments, that has no ability to make statements. So instead, artists issue press releases on Web2 platforms, undermining the integrity of the Web3 ecosystem. DAOs are at the very center of the promise of Web3. And yet DAO governance thus far, which is supposed to be the great promise of DAOs, has been done primarily through fungible and tradable tokens, allowing anyone who can buy up 51% of the tokens to loot the rest of the value in the ecosystem, and thus undermining the ability of DAOs to thrive. Now, in joint work with Vitalik Buterin and Pujol Haver, we have a vision for how we can address many of these problems at the same time. And this has become something of a phenomenon within the Web3 community. Within the first month of us posting this paper, it was already in the top 50 most downloaded papers of all time on the Social Science Research Network. And within a few days, Beeple created an artwork, NFT artwork commemorating it. The basic idea of this paper is to build what we call a decentralized society, starting with a new type of token, what we call a soul-bound token. These are, at least initially, public, non-transferable statements that one wallet can make to another, and that are revocable by the issuer, but not transferable by the person who receives it, at least not unilaterally. And these soul-bound tokens represent something like the public things you would put on a curriculum vitae, or public commitments you want to make, causes that you've signed on to, groups that you're affiliated with and proud to be affiliated with, badges that you hold, credentials or publications that you're proud of. And these soul-bound tokens, in contrast to a standard NFT, are not financial objects. They can't be moved around. They're a part of the relationship between the issuer and the receiver, rather than just the property of the person who receives them. Now, there's a lot of questions around privacy of these, because in the simplest version, where you just put them on chain, they can become a very public identity. And I'm going to return to some of these issues of privacy, which I think are very important later. But I want to start by illustrating what this general category of thing makes possible, and then to come back to all the ways to build those protections around it. Okay, so let me return to some of these classic problems in the current DeFi ecosystem. So when you issue an NFT, in order to attest to its scarcity, you put out a press release because there's no way to make a real commitment that binds you as a person using a wallet that you can transfer or that things just freely go into and out of. But if you had a wallet with a bunch of tokens in it that represented your credentials, different conferences you'd gone to, different NFTs you'd issued, and then when you issue a new NFT, you could put into that wallet sort of a non-transferable token that acts as a signature to the transferable NFTs that you're giving to others, and that anyone holding those NFTs can come back and see and say, look, this person made this commitment, they've lived up to it or not, to not issue more artworks that are similar to this. And so that person can then pledge their reputation to ensure the scarcity of the item being attested to. Much like blockchain solves the double spend problem, the double issue problem for art can be solved using these non-transferable soul-bound tokens. Another example is that huge problem in the current Web3 ecosystem is that you can easily lose your private keys or have them hacked, or worst of all, you could be kidnapped and someone could force you to reveal them. Now, some people try to get around this by custodying their keys, but that in turn just undermines the whole value of decentralization in the ecosystem. To overcome this, many people have been using recently social recovery, where fragments of your keys are given to other wallets, and some fraction of these can jointly regenerate your keys or prevent you from making a large transaction. The problem is that requires that you pay a lot of attention to who you have those relationships with, keeping them up to date, making sure all their wallets are up to date, etc. An alternative is to actually use these social affiliations and credentials and relationships that are stored as soul-bound tokens as a foundation for generating a set of people who can regenerate your wallet so that it stays up to date with all of your social relationships dynamically over time. And finally, while the DeFi ecosystem has allowed for a huge amount of growth and speculation, some of the basic things like how do you lend out a piece of property, like a house? How do you lease a house to someone or an apartment to someone? Just don't work in the ecosystem because all the tokens are transferable. So if I lease it to person A, that person could just resell that lease to someone else. And that just allows infinite rights of sublease, which are not usually what you do in a lease agreement. With a non-transferable token, with a soul-bound token, you can issue a lease to someone that ends at some period of time, and during that period, they're the only one who's able to access that property. Okay, so these are just some of the basic limitations of the current ecosystem that we can get past, but there are much more powerful things that we can do with soul-bound tokens as well. So right now, airdrops are critical to starting up new protocols, new tokens, etc. But they either go out to wallets, which can easily be attacked by just replicating a large number of wallets, or they go out to people who already hold tokens, which just makes the rich richer. What you'd really like to do is instead issue tokens to people who have been involved in the community in the way, who've accomplished certain things, who will add things to your new protocol, which you could do if they were holding a set of SPTs that you could compute over to figure out who to airdrop to. And once you give them the airdrop, you don't want them to just immediately trade those away. Otherwise, what was the point? You want them to hold them for some period of time. And you could program that in using soul-bound tokens to gradually become something that the person could sell. Second, this ecosystem can empower us to do a much richer form of horizontal, social-based lending, like the Grameen Bank does in Bangladesh, for example, using people's social relationships as the way to identify who might be credit worthy. And then when you give someone a loan, posting that to their profile, or if some friends co-insure it with them, to all of their profiles, so that they're staking that reputation. And once they pay it off, it can be removed, but they have that at stake. And therefore, other lenders won't necessarily be willing to lend to them. Well, they have another loan out, which allows control of unsustainable debt burdens. And the person has a strong reason to repay that loan, allowing for uncollateralized lending. Finally, well, I talked about the way in which you could use these sort of signatures as ways to create value for NFTs. Those signatures for creative works are not just valuable to create monetary value, but also to create truth value. In an age when deep fakes are increasingly possible, when you can misrepresent content very easily, social signatures, social proof that something comes from where it claims to come from is going to be critical. And signatures from accounts with reputations will be crucial to achieving that. And so I think these SBTs could eventually become the foundation for how we think about the credibility of social information. But even beyond these applications, there's ways to really completely reimagine the structure of our societies and really achieve a lot of the revolution that people have been touting for Web3 using these tools. And we're starting to see the seeds of this in things like optimism, which is governing its DAO using a combination of soul-bound tokens and more standard transferable tokens, and eventually working towards something where we can use not just like a governance, non-transferable governance token, but instead we can use the whole set of relationships people have, which says what protocols are they involved in, what conferences do they attend, to understand that certain people may be part of a group that may be working together, and we may want to get consensus across those groups and not just within them, not just count the number of people or the tokens, but how diverse the set of people participating in something is. And soul-bound tokens give us a way to measure that. They also give us a way to really combine two of the most powerful paradigms for prediction today. On the one hand, there's the AI vision, where we just hoover up lots of people's data without them really knowing about it and build predictive models. And another where we have these sort of very financialized betting pools that prediction markets create. But soul-bound tokens lets us do something in between that, where we keep track of who we're getting data from and how we're combining that using these soul-bound tokens to relate the data to the model, and therefore also allowing us to reward people for giving high quality data. So we can combine a bit of the financial incentives of prediction markets with the richness in which AI models combine things to create far more powerful prediction engines than either of them give on their own. And finally, right now, the NFT ecosystem allows us to have private property, where we combine the right to use something, the right to sell it or get rid of it or change it, and the right to benefit from it financially. But if you think about corporations and so many of the other structures of our society, they often give us access to things that we can't sell or destroy or take the profits from. For example, I'm an employee of Microsoft. And as an employee of Microsoft, I can access a lot of facilities, though not all. I can get some of the benefits of the stock price, but I can't sell Microsoft assets without many other people in the company participating. And soul-bound tokens will allow us to carve these things up. They'll allow us to give access rights to defined people, to allow other people to have the right to, say, buy something out from us for some price, and then to allow the financial rights to be separated from that. And in doing so, they will allow us to both replicate the most rich and diverse patterns of property in the world today and to create radically new ones that aren't possible with just this simplistic notion of private property. And in doing so, I think that they really allow us to get to a vision of society that is much closer to what the originators of the internet were aiming towards. Right now, we have a conversation about the future where there's both like a very top-down AI view, surveillance-based central planning, and one that's based on this hyper-financialized, everything's economic and tradable, et cetera, vision. But the founders of the internet, their whole reason for creating a network was that the social vision of thinkers like Georg Simmel and John Dewey proposed that society is not either these individual people in this market, nor this top-down thing, but rather collections of people cooperating in overlapping and intersecting ways that could be represented by a network. And therefore, we could replace centralized systems and pure markets like the AT&T switchboards with a system based on a network of networks. And that, I think, is what decentralized society will allow us to start to create. And doing that will require treating privacy, not just making everything public in the way that a simple on-chain solution would be, but treating privacy in the same way. Not having it be about public versus private, but instead being about which communities have access to which information and who has the right to share that information outside of that social context, basing privacy on what Helen Nissenbaum calls contextual integrity. And I do believe that building off of a decentralized society and soul-bound tokens, we can get there. So I think there's increasing clarity that the next upcycle of the crypto world is going to be building on these primitives or related primitives around verifiable credentials that Jack Dorsey and Block have been promoting. There's some differences between them, but they have a lot in common. Just as an indication of that, at ETH NYC, which is one of the biggest hackathons in the community, all 5 of the 5 winners were soul-bound token decentralized society projects. So I think there's a very good chance that this is going to be at the center of the future that we're all creating. And I hope as leaders in the Web3 ecosystem, you'll join me in helping make this possible. Thank you.